I personally adore the graphic and artistic presentation of Morrowind, which I understand might be hard to believe, but for reference, some of my favorite video games of all time are Ocarina of Time, Fallout New Vegas, and the first generation of Pokemon. I'm no stranger to rough graphics, and I never installed additional graphical mod packs on top of OpenMW, since it already improves them to a degree I liked. However, if you are just such a darn stickler that a tree doesn't have
17,000 polygons,
then there are plenty of mod packs out there to improve it. On the art side of things, I'm also going to defend the overwhelming brown of the game, as I think the game is strikingly beautiful. As you go around the coast and starting town of Seydanin, you'll see swampy beaches, then a rocky inland around Balmora and Caldera, before the game goes to the red-brownish mountain everyone memes on, which makes geographical sense as Vardenfell is a volcanic island. But more than that, I feel does add a visual distinction to the general difficulty progression of the game. The more peaceful looking areas are the easiest, with the brown-reddish mountains containing the highest amount of blighted enemies and ash storms, which will make navigation by directions more difficult and disorienting. However, to contrast this is the sky, which outside of poor weather is a beautiful blue sky in the day and starry at night, which really highlights that Vardenfell is within the Elder Scrolls setting. While Daggerfall, Cyrodiil, and Skyrim tend to have more picturesque fantasy settings, Morrowind looks much closer to something like Fallout, and the bleak situation the region is in is highlighted beautifully by the geography of the region being somewhat abrasive. When this almost antagonistic world is contrasted to the bright blue sky, it reminds you that there is a world worth living in this game, and that your struggle to help this region's people is worth it, which is something I felt multiple times once the storms would pass. On the weaker side are the ancestral tombs, which can be very bland if you have to complete them back to back, but even then the caves usually make up for this, as makes sense considering the volcanic activity. The caves tend to always have spots of water for visual flair. And sometimes, like with the Urshulaku caves, you'll get something really visually striking. The sound design is memed on a bit, and since training restoration manually while running around Vivec, and using ice magic since it's the best for the Dunmer population, has made my teeth hurt, I do think in a vein similar to Oblivion's silly dialogue that the game's audio-visual presentation can at times be downright hilarious.
You're beaten!
I adore goofy games, so the moment-to-moment gameplay being silly is something I appreciate. And it's honestly so impressive that the amazing skyboxes and evil scary Dwemer ruins coincide with RuneScape character models and Windows 7 sound effects, and it doesn't feel very wrong. Movement is something that should be trivial, but sadly is actually worth going over. In Morrowind, you move fucking slow. Like, to such an insane degree, I don't think people actually understand. To get the point across, the character I have on screen is a Bosmer, who naturally starts at 50 speed, who took speed as a specialized attribute, tagged athletics as a major skill, which factors into the equation, and took the steed for 25-point bonus to speed, making this the fastest start possible. Here's an orc who starts with 30 speed that didn't tag speed or athletics or take the steed sign. What's even crazier is that what I just showed you was running, and that the game actually has a walking feature. Why? Because running, the faster of the two modes, consumes fatigue. Fatigue in this game factors into RNG, and in this game, almost literally every single aspect of the game is determined by RNG, meaning spending less time walking actively hurts your ability to play the game. Or in other words, moving faster makes the game worse. There's a few justifications for this, which I want to shut down here. It's realistic. Yes, but that doesn't mean it's fun. Food is in the game, why don't you have to eat? Why can you levitate so high while still breathing if you can drown? Why don't you get infected when hit by rusty weapons if you can catch diseases from monsters? If you can jump to Solstheim, why can't you jump to Skyrim or Blacklight? Why does Nalcaria not arrest you after you steal her diamonds if you shop within a day of stealing them, but come back months later with a diamond and she enters combat? Because games are meant to be fun. Or maybe Morrowind isn't supposed to be fun? If you think that's the case, then sure. You can restore fatigue with potions or magic. Morrowind already makes the world difficult enough for pure warriors and thieves that adding even more sway to the power of magic would just expose how dog water the game would be without magic. You end up with so much fatigue that it doesn't matter anyways. This is one of the fairer points, but honestly this promotes the insanely stunted early game, which I dislike very heavily. As a gamer, I would prefer the difficulty to either gradually increase or be paced evenly, which this game does completely backwards. The early game is a time where not only is the world hazardous because of the enemies, but add on top of that low hit chance from your skills, since your first Morrowind build will probably suck, and then low fatigue, all because you wanted less of your time wasted walking. If fatigue management was a whole game concern, I could understand this point more, but by level 15 or 20, even on my first run, I could basically ignore it, which was incredibly suboptimally built. The boots of blinding speed exist. So do Argonians and Khajiit, who can't wear those boots. Even for the human races, a new player doesn't know how to find them, or circumnavigate the blinding effect. And due to the boot's low light armor nature, it nerfs all builds, and constantly repairing the 50 HP boots is a hassle if you turn the difficulty up, or if you enter a DLC area. In short, speed either should have been faster by default, or not drain fatigue. There isn't even the argument that the game couldn't handle high speed. I've used a character that almost reached 500 speed, and that character still received damage in combat and didn't crash the game instantly. Now that movement is out of the way, we should go over combat. When you swing a melee weapon, whether it be a blade, axe, blunt weapon, fist, bow and arrow, or thrown weapon, the game runs a calculation based off your agility, luck, weapon skill, and effects like attack to determine whether you hit the enemy. Hit chance. I'll just say bluntly that I hate it, but that I do sadly understand that Morrowind would collapse if you took it out. There are effectively 3 progressions baked into Morrowind: damage, hit chance, and equipment. A new character can min-max their character to have good strength from the get-go, meaning that with Morrowind's open world and fixed item placement philosophy, a level 1 Nord could have 60 strength and Scourge, a Daedric mace, which would be an endgame character. To counterbalance this, that Nord would likely have a relatively low hit chance, meaning they still couldn't reliably win against enemies like Dremora or Ordinators. If hit chance were removed, the entire game would need enemy scaling, and it would just turn into Skyrim inside of the world space of Vardenfell. The fixed item placement and enemies are too integral to what makes Morrowind Morrowind, so I think hit chance is a bitter pill you have to swallow if you want to play this game. On the other side of combat RNG is magic cast chance, which is very similar in using a stat check to determine whether or not you cast a spell. The reason I think people harp on this less is for a few reasons, first being that you can see the chance to cast, which makes it feel more fair. When I know the chance cast is 3%, I get less mad when it fails. Like, yeah, that's my fault for even trying. When I have 50 Longblade, using the bound longsword that fortifies my chance to hit, and I still miss, it feels terrible because I don't have a number to check and see if I got the 4% chance to miss, or if I'm flipping a coin at 50% and it's more fair that I didn't hit. Second, spells have out-of-combat utility. To paraphrase Waffle Tabernacle, failing a hit and roll in combat doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying to fight and meditate or something. It just means I'm going to die. With spells, however, failing a cast usually has lesser repercussions, so you can just rest to get your magic back or go do something else. As an example, I usually carry lockpicks until I have a 100% chance to cast an open 50 spell, which makes the skill progression convenient and powerful while the low RNG rolls don't necessarily keep me from solving most locks with an alternate method. Really, the only area low cast chance screws you over is teleportation, since even mysticism talented races majoring in it at class creation start with less than 100% chance to cast, which can slow you down while traversing areas like Vivek. 80% sounds fine unless you've played Pokemon and you understand how important 100% really is. 3. If a spell is cast successfully, the effect is guaranteed. They could have very easily added hit chance after cast chance for mages, but they didn't, and I'm so grateful for that. Finally, we have out-of-combat RNG. Things like enchanting items, creating potions, repairing gear, picking locks, smooth-talking NPCs, haggling, picking pockets, and sneaking are all determined by RNG rolls. While the RNG rolls in combat are necessary to prevent rushing the best gears, and RNG on spells is very clearly defined and easy enough to understand and improve, I will not try to defend this as it's just mostly tedious. While I can understand your magical pool as a set number of RNG rolls you can use before you run out, having alchemy ingredients and sorting through the clunky potion making UI to finally find 2 ingredients before mixing them together just to see all 5 of the potions fail just does not feel good ever. While Oblivion does have some degree of skill gating, as some spells need a skill check to cast or enchanted gear can't be repaired until 50, the frustratingly low chance to perform actions below skill level 20 or so ends up somehow feeling worse than just being told to get to 25 before you do it. Now, I tried as hard as I could to be very apologetic to RNG, but I do honestly hate it. Most people who complain just say Oblivion and Skyrim are fine, but in combat in those games in vanilla are pretty bad, and honestly worse than Morrowind overall. My suggestion to fix RNG in the sequel to Morrowind we never got would be bonus RNG, where there is a bare minimum progress to be had with the RNG acting as a reward for investment on top of a baseline progression, rather than the necessity for even the bare minimum. Take weapon skills, which already have variable damages based on the type of attack performed. With an RNG roll, it could allow your attack to either do baseline damage, add 2 of the damage numbers, or all 3, which would end up making most weapons devastating in the current game balance. With the RNG ending up in a place, and with 100 in skill, agility, and luck, you're more likely to roll double, and with fortification past 100, you could end up in cases where you're likely to score triples, but not guaranteed, while preserving the early game balance, since you could have relatively low strength. Since you end up as a god anyways, having the enemies operate on this system would mean high-level enemies would high roll and obliterate you at low levels, while at higher levels you would retain the godhood Morrowind allows. For things like spells, the RNG could be cost. The stated cost is the bare minimum, but with improved skills there could be a chance to reduce the cost by half or even a third, meaning you could build a battle plan to use a certain amount of ranged magic before you switch to touch spells, but because of your cool RNG roll you could get lucky and spam target spells for longer, possibly eliminating the melee half of the fight, with the chances of an encounter like this at level 1 being really low to maintain the progression. Now, I'm not saying I can make a better game than Bethesda, that's not the intention of this, but people act like there's no alternative to what Morrowind's RNG is, while that's just not true. In a true sequel to Morrowind, there could have been an alternate system to the RNG like this, that makes it so that the RNG gives you a reward for advancing in skill. Everyone says hitting consistently is a reward, but I firmly disagree. When I streamed my first experiences in Morrowind, and I realized I could consistently hit things after like 10 or so hours, I didn't feel stronger. I felt like, oh, finally combat isn't as annoying now. Which is something I really want to stress, that getting out of that hole you start in isn't fun or rewarding. It's a barrier to entry. Most other skills are rather simple to explain. The haggling system is like Oblivion's but with RNG. Picking locks means attaching a pick or a probe like a dagger and attacking the lock. Really, only Speechcraft and Enchanting need to be delved into. Speechcraft has Admiration, which seems to be dependent on the skill, personality, and luck. Threaten, which is dependent on your level. Taunt, which isn't worth explaining since it barely works. And bribing like Oblivion, in 10, 100, and 1000 gold increments. By the time you have the RNG numbers to roll an Admiration, you either have the gold to bribe, or spells to bypass the check anyways. I could not provoke one NPC in over 100 plus hours of playing with a taunt, even at super high personality and speechcraft skills. Bribing 10 gold is supposed to be the most cost-efficient way, but I have had multiple instances where just paying 100 up front got a result that over a dozen 10 gold bribes didn't. And 100 was consistent enough I never needed the 1000 option. Threaten is interesting since it depends on your level, meaning at level 30 and beyond I never saw this option fail. Meaning the entire system kind of falls apart at feeling like a speech system. But given that it's a common occurrence in quests, it does feel rewarding to threaten someone for an answer to show how strong your character has gotten. Or skip performing an errand by slipping the guy 100 gold, exposing how shallow these nationalist Dunmer really are. Enchanting is by far the most drastic change in this game compared to the later games, and is better and worse for it. All items can be given spell enchantments, which can be used as spells. These have a charge cost, and all items hold charges based on the soul used to enchant, meaning you can make gloves with a fortify hand-to-hand effect, a cuirass that regenerates health, boots that let you jump higher, and weapons that conjure better weapons in a pinch. If you're the type of player who loves managing temporary effects, then the enchanting system is for you and allows for some of the most powerful characters in the game. However, I don't like temporary effects, so I prefer constant enchantments, which you will likely not be putting into your gear, since only a few types of armor have the ability to hold these magnitudes of enchantment at all, and only Golden Saints can be reliably used to achieve this. With tons of meta knowledge, you might have some decent enchantments, but it leads to every character wearing their disco robes and bug helms for their enchant values.
The silhouette looks like the motherfucker's wearing Jinko jeans.
And even then, you just flat out cannot replicate the best artifacts found in-game anyways. Meaning enchanting will most likely end up applying to weapons, where cast on strike functions like it does in other games, with two key distinctions. Enchanted items can be repaired by repair hammers from level 5 armorer skill, unlike Oblivion, and that enchanted items recharge over time, meaning spamming Azura Star isn't a necessity the instant you can temper enchanted items, unlike Skyrim. Meaning boosting enchant for literally only the purpose of getting more use out of a sword is completely viable. The only downside to enchanting is that, done outside of a vendor, it caps out at 80% chance to create the item. Meaning if you try to put a cool effect on that super rare Daedric sword in Vivek's Soul and fail, I mean, screw you, they're gone. Using vendors then is expensive, and the more powerful enchantments I could make cost upwards of 140,000 gold. Overall, it forces you to accept temporary effects or play without enchantments until the very, very late game. Which is actually very cool, since timing temporary effects in battle is an IRL skill, and the constant effects can warp your character just as much, if not more, than the extra effect perk in Skyrim. Armor is one of the only skills that isn't random and is more heavily determined by skill than other games, meaning someone specialized in medium armor would get more use out of Bone Mold, the worst medium armor in the game, than the Dark Brotherhood armor, the second best light armor in the game. Nothing but praise here. Amazing. Incredible. Feeling good. On top of this comes more slots to put armor on, like pauldrons, greaves, and the ability to wear clothing under your armor and robes over it. While this destroys the game balance Unarmored offers by making it not only the weakest but also the lowest enchant value, it feels so good to have clothes on under your armor and stack all of the effects, especially considering that clothing has higher enchant values than armor, meaning you can choose armor mainly for protection and clothing for boosts. Attributes function like they do in Oblivion by affecting everything you do in some way, and god, with the special system in New Vegas, I gotta say I just love attributes. Fuck the color juice from Skyrim. All my homies hate the juice. Increasing attributes works exactly like it does in Oblivion with one difference, being that there are 10 skills that affect your leveling instead of 7, meaning your character levels for longer. If you know Oblivion, you might be like really scared hearing that, but don't worry, Morrowind actually gets the leveling system right. Since enemies don't scale very much, it means even a character choosing to only gain 3 attributes per level can still keep up by focusing on their class skills. Unlike Oblivion, where a character that gets 15 attributes per level can still end up weaker than the enemies around them. LOL. Instead of needing those bonuses to keep up, they are actually bonuses that feel good and rewarding. And due to trainers having no limits on their training per level, you can power level a skill you don't use like hand to hand to get plus 5 speed in that level. Meaning once you start earning more gold, you can power level to a degree, which cuts back on the tedious grinding that comes with trying to get plus 5 attributes like in Oblivion with spellcasting. Not to mention that every attribute is actually useful, for even more reasons than in Oblivion. Personality is like the meme dump stat of RPGs, and while it is unquestionably the worst attribute, it is still incredibly useful to have at high values. And especially to start with a higher personality like how Imperials do. It will actually make the game noticeably easier.
Why walk when you can ride?
With baseline mechanics over, what good would they be if the game didn't challenge those stats with good quests and factions, right? To get this out of the way, most quests in Morrowind are dookie, and realistically a quest is going to tell you to go somewhere to get something, kill someone, talk to someone, or escort someone. However, the reason Morrowind's quests work in general is how you accomplish this. When someone tells you to go somewhere, there isn't a map marker on screen. You get written instructions telling you how to get there. Like when you're told to go to Caius, you're told the south wall in Balmora. No specific directions, so you have to ask or look around town to find the south wall. Then you ask around inside and the guy says, go out, take a right, take a left, and he's at the end. There are a few issues with this. Like the fact that sometimes the written instructions are just like sort of wrong. And then the game will say northeast, but it's basically just a straight line east. So you go diagonally on the map and waste like half an hour looking northeast, only for it to be like literally east. This happened especially in the Morag Tonggrits that were out in the wild and on Solstheim. Another issue is that sometimes the game just doesn't write this stuff down. Like, you accept the Mephala quest to go poison some dude, and the journal just says, I have agreed to help Mephala. Like, no shit, asshole. Where am I supposed to go? The final issue is that written instructions is that they're just sort of unnecessary. People hype them up to this weird degree, like, I can't wait until this sky baby learns there aren't floating map markers in real life. But the problem is that literally every smartphone, like the one you're using to watch this, comes with a GPS we can use to get a map marker to anywhere in the world. And even in universe, clairvoyance exists. It's literally a spell in the setting. Not to mention, half the locations you're supposed to use as reference, map markers for navigation, don't get marked on the map, even when you discovered them, which leads to you having to find it a second time. So written instructions end up feeling very unnecessary and frustrating. But I will say that on rare occasion, they did feel good to use, which is why in a true sequel to Morrowind, I think the game should have written instructions, with clairvoyance available for quests where you're given direct instructions, as there are still quests that are intentionally vague, like the tax collector murder, or the Imperial Cult Oracle quests, where you can only get directions of the people who can help you, like you, or are alive, which are quests where clairvoyance wouldn't be able to help. When you head to Balmora, you're told to take the Silt Strider, which is one of the few means of fast travel. See, old games didn't have fast travel. Except for Daggerfall, but I'm a Morrow boomer, so we don't talk about that game. The fast travel system is cool for making the world believable and easy enough to figure out. You can take a Silt Strider to go from town to town, a guild guide to teleport between the Mages Guild halls, take a ship from port to port, teleport with the Propylon indices between Dunmer strongholds, use the Alm Sylvie and Divine Intervention spells to warp to the nearest religious symbols, or custom mark a location and recall to it with the respective spells. If you think about it for a bit, this sounds cool, but relatively early on I discovered the best place to mark, which is the Sadrith Mora docks. Since from here, you can take a boat, Alm Sylvie to Moligmar for a Silt Strider, Divine Intervention to Wolverine Hall for the Guild Guide, or head west for the Dunmer Stronghold Fallen Sorrow, which starts the Indike Circuit. I think the early game barrier works, but eventually it's almost purely tedious to recall, walk to a service, then travel again, and walk again until you're there. However, I do think fast travel should be limited to towns and strongholds, as the feeling of figuring out how to efficiently reach your destination is legitimately very cool. At first, you might water walk on coasts to run into the least resistance. Then you might levitate over hills in short bursts. Then you might literally Hulk Ultimate Destruction for the PS2 jump over the map. This manual journeying also serves as a chance to see how strong you are by fighting cliff racers, which are the best enemy in the game. They're cute little pterodactyl guys who make funny little sounds and will fight even levitating or jumping characters. I'll say now that if you hate cliff racers, you hate Morrowind. Every single enemy behaves like cliff racers except for their speed, which includes Slaughterfish, Nixhounds, Ashlander Dunmer, and all other sorts of beasts. If you hate how persistent the cliff racers are, you just don't like wild enemy encounters in this game. Like, I don't know what to tell you, because they all boil down to some creature charging you and making a noise over and over relentlessly. Finally, when you make it to Caius Casades and stare at his anime-ass buff old man abs, you'll realize he doesn't have dialogue like the tutorial guards did. You do actually have to read in this game.
Read, nigga! Read!
This is a rare Morrowind W, no buts. I can't stress enough that the journal, if it actually writes everything down, means you can mostly just mash through the related quest dialogue and then check the journal to see what to actually do or where to go. Meaning memorization isn't even that necessary for the most part. This would be fine, but on top of the fact that most of the guilds and especially the main story are worth getting invested in and reading, helps make the reading aspect not only tolerable, but enjoyable. And while I do certainly adore Wes Johnson and Dagoth,
Come, Nerevar, friend or traitor, come. Oh, please, Nerevar, spare me. Oh, dear me, forgive me, but I am enjoying this. I surrender. I surrender. Omnipotent.
Given Bethesda's voice acting quality in general,
You look strong. Come to Norvasker and be a companion.
I don't think having to listen to all of the dialogue you're supposed to read would be very good, with a few notable exceptions. Yes, I'm Crashius Curio, but you can call me Uncle Crassius. Ah yes, that is my name, but it sounds like music when you say it. A Hordador is a champion who leads by inspiration. He challenges opposing heroes in single combat. He goes on long, desperate quests. I'm so glad to see you again, Meat. All the counselors agree? Splendid. I'm so happy for you. What an honor. But no more than you deserve, Pumpkin. And now I have a little treat for you. It's a belt given to the Hortator of House Lalu. Just snug it around that supple little waist now. I know you have important things to do, but don't be a stranger. Don't neglect poor, lonely Uncle Crassius, your devoted admirer. And since so much dialogue is necessary to understand the culture and geography of Vardenfell, Trying to simply voice the dialogue already present would be a horrible solution due to budgeting and time. Really, I have tried to argue against the Morrow boomers and come up with solutions the whole video, but this doesn't need fixing. When you start the main quest for Caius, you'll be told to go join the factions and train before he gives you orders. This is so nice since it gives an in-universe explanation as to how you can just ignore the main quest and encourages you to try the guilds, which in Balmora includes the Thieves, Fighters, and Mages guilds, as well as the Temple, House Lalu, and the Morag Tong. This gives each archetypal character one set of quests as well as a great house to join, setting up new characters to do a few quests in and around Balmora to earn some gold for training. Like in Oblivion and Skyrim, leveling skills is just as horrible in Morrowind, if not worse, due to the omnipresent RNG. It is circumvented by the training system. When you find a trainer, which are everywhere, you can train a skill to the level that matches the attribute. Meaning if you have 50 speed since you're a Dunmer, you can train unarmored to 50 since it's governed by speed. No training limit in between levels. Longblade, Sneak, Mysticism, you want it? It's yours, my friend. So long as you have enough gold. While the attribute cap for trading does sometimes screw over a character who tags too many of their attribute skills as majors, which can leave you unable to train, there are ways around this, and having skills at 30 to 50 is totally doable for the first few quests. So if this system works so well, why do new players struggle so hard with getting their skills up early? Because the game does not do a good job at explaining anything. Since this is the point in the main story where you decide to ignore the guilds or join one, either way you'll be told to do something other than talking to someone. And this is when new players put down the game. And you know what? I don't blame them. My first run made it to the egg poachers in the mine before I quit because I didn't understand what was happening. See, everything I explained before, the game doesn't really explain in blunt or forward language. And if a game is going to have as many moving parts as this, they need to be thoroughly explained to the player. Since I ran to the egg mine, I wasted my fatigue. Then I kept missing because of the hit chance RNG. Then my gear broke even though I was missing. Then the enemy's gear broke, so we both fought hand to hand and missed each other for 20 minutes until I decided to stop playing. Why did this scenario happen? Well, now I know it's because I wasted my fatigue, then used a low durability weapon I wasn't skilled in. But did the game ever say, hey, you only have 20% chance to hit? Or tell me what multiplier my fatigue was impacting that dice roll by? Or tell me that durability lowers even on a miss when my weapon broke? Or that attacks can miss in general even if the models intersect? No. The fact that there are a million pop-ups in the census office explaining how to open the menu kind of proves that the game could have explained more, and intentionally didn't. The lack of a visible hit chance percent in combat is also a deliberate decision, since the spells menu shows you your chance to cast, which actually does fluctuate depending on fatigue and silence, meaning the frustrating lack of feedback in combat is likely intentional. When you combine this with the low movement speeds and the fact that non-combat quests suck early on, most people don't make it past Balmora for a reason. The second type of quest you get besides killing things is item retrieval. How this is done can technically vary, but most of the time it boils down to walking somewhere and walking back. Or maybe there's a thievery type element introduced. The House Lalu quest in Balmora literally has you just walking to someone in Aldrune and bringing the papers you get back. No personality check or anything. It only exists to further punish Beast Race characters since you won't even get this quest or the reward since you need to wear a helmet you're given for one dialogue exchange. An example of a more nuanced fetch quest in the Thieves Guild quest to get a diamond for Habasi. She wants a diamond and points you to Nalkaria's shop. There's one diamond on the table in front of her, one in her merchant inventory, and 3 locked in her chest upstairs. As far as a thief goes, these test the sneak, mercantile, and security skills, which allow you to choose an approach best suited to your highest skill. The only problem is that while this allowing you to use your stealth skills is cool, most mage characters can also accomplish this task. Magic is overpowered in Morrowind, to such an extent it introduces the dilemma of gameplay freedom versus the optimal path. Something YouTuber video essay optimized the fun out of their game. Magic in Morrowind is so powerful that it can invalidate entire skills and attributes. Take the Habasi Diamond quest. A player with Induce Eyes Open, a spell from the Alteration skill, could invalidate the option to lockpick. To buy the diamonds, a player could use a Fortify Personality spell from Restoration to bypass the Mercantile skill. Or a Chameleon spell from the Illusion Tree could be used to bypass the Sneak skill. In a similar vein, a lot of chests are trapped with magical spells that will harm the player, which can be disabled using probes from the security skill. However, a mysticism mage could use telekinesis to get around this trap, since the trap only activates on touch. What this means is that knowing the spells Induce Eyes Opening and Telekinesis and having access to a spellmaker, invalidate the entire security skill. And these aren't difficult to find spells either. They're in Balmora, in a town you'll be sent to in the early stages of the main quest. Frenzy is another spell in an easily accessible town that essentially bypasses the taunt to fight part of the speechcraft system. And with DLC vendors like in Mournhold, which you will likely end up seeking out to stop the Dark Brotherhood attacks, you can get the Fortify skill effect, which due to how menu timing works can also invalidate the armor, alchemy, and enchanting skills by crafting 100 magnitude spells that last 1 or 2 seconds. Conjuration is also one of the stronger skills since bound weapons have a +10 skill modifier, and stats equal to Daedric, meaning you can almost ignore your character build and have one of the strongest weapons in your class available in Balmora, that you can use decently well at least, since 15 is comparable to the 20 a 5 skill with a minor skill bonus would have. Levitate bypasses the acrobatic skill for dungeon crawling. Jump bypasses acrobatics for world traversal. Fuckhead! And water walking bypasses the athletic skill in bodies of water. Restore attribute and cure disease can invalidate the religious altars, and there are areas only magic can do. Calming an NPC can allow you to raise their disposition so they're permanently friendly, which multiple of the master trainers in the game start off hostile. Fortifying an attribute with spells allows you to train outside your attribute limit, removing that barrier to progression. Restoring fatigue over time can effectively negate the running issue, and Sanctuary has a more direct impact on evasion than agility point for point. Resist Magicka is necessary for the Boots of Blinding Speed and easier to cast than finding or making potions in the early game, and weightless to carry around, meaning in a sense it also helps solve the speed issue. While I'm saying this like it's a bad thing, I'm sort of split. There are alternatives if you never want to cast a spell once, but honestly it would make the entire game so much more tedious and inventory management focused that I could not imagine trying to play Morrowind without magic. And since magic can be custom crafted at the spellmaker and you can see the cast chance, it feels so good to improve a skill and check and see the number to cast go up over time. I just wanted to go over how OP magic is to highlight that if your character can hit things with a sword and can cast spells, there's only static high-level enemies stopping you from completing any quest in the game outside of Balmora. In this way, the flexibility on offer on any quest is basically up to you, which is incredible.
Why would you adopt me?
Because you're
The main quest of Morrowind is where all of the good writing in the game, best dungeon designs, and interesting quests are. The first quest telling you to go join a guild and get stronger is so perfect as a start to allow your character to organically go do side quests and also make sense in-universe. You're a scrawny clown snatch who just made it to Morrowind and Kaya sizes you up perfectly. From here, the next two quests force you to learn the written direction system, and the Dwemer Ruin dungeon will teach most players about the concept of coming back to a ruin you couldn't explore, as ass-fat himbo Hollis will give you a key that opens a previously locked door, which with the randomly difficult placed dungeons that are just really tough, it helps organically tell you that some dungeons are just too tough, but that they'll still be there when you can meet the challenge. Caius even says something like this directly. Chef's kiss, man. Just impeccable. After this great start, the game will send you to Vivec, and I have to say that I do like Vivec, but that it's a situation where I like more than I dislike. Really, Vivec is a problem to navigate due to the game's movement speed and lack of magic regeneration, as the city isn't so bad as you learn the design pattern of the cantons, and if you can always reset your location with Almcivi intervention, you can't really get lost. But as it is in vanilla, you come here early and magic doesn't regenerate, so Vivec does fail, and is fairly criticized since when you have to come here, you won't be ready for it. But I still really like the canton system, and the way the gameplay mechanics tie into the character writing of Vivec himself. I think it's really well done.
My pronouns are they and them. Not because I'm non-binary, but because I'm literally two niggas.
Vivec is such an egomaniac that when Sheogorath threw Bardal at Vivec, he stopped the meteor but left it above Vivec's temple as a monument to remind his subjects how powerful and worthy of fear he is. The cantons themselves are full of wanted criminals and the underworks infested with cults, but it's up to the player as an agent of the guilds or temple to clean the city up, rather than the god Vivec, who literally lives here, which reinforces just how miserable and pathetically weak the Tribunal have become due to their war with Dagoth. The quest in Vivec asks for different solutions to their problems than the dungeon delving combat from before, just in case you beeline to the main story here, which I think is a nice touch. Something even cooler I like to go over is something called the back door, since technically you can start that quest here in Vivec right now, but realistically most players wouldn't know that they could or even know how. Vivec is inside his palace, which is locked at level 100 and trapped, which as we went over in the magic section, means you might be able to open this door the first time you visit Vivec. Inside Vivec's palace, he won't turn hostile and just says,
You need
and refuses to talk, but you can murder him here and now and take Wraithguard, the artifact on his body, to a character you would have met in the main story later, and get it fixed up to go straight after Sunder and Keening, the weapons necessary to defeat Dagoth and end the game. See, in Morrowind, there are no essential characters. Besides Dagoth any character can be walked up to and murdered, provided you have the skill to achieve this. Most people leave this out when talking about essential characters, but Vivek is not a pushover. Despite making fairly strong characters, he's a consistent challenge. Seeing as I dislike Vivek and Almalexia, it's incredibly satisfying to build a character strong enough to walk up, break into his throne room, and murder him for the item I need. Could you imagine if in Skyrim, a high-level Dragonborn could just walk up and kill Ulfric and end the Civil War in one day? Almost as if they were a legendary hero of terrible power and prophecy? Kinda makes you think. After this, you'll have to go find out where the Ashlander camps are and go to one, which will force you to actually journey out into the Ashlands. The Ashlanders of Morrowind are ultra-national xenophobic tradcasts who worship the Nerevarine prophecies and the Good Daedra, the modern tribunal of Azura, Boethia, and Mephala. If you find the right guy, you can tell him to square up, but he recognizes you'd rock his shit and lets you talk to the boss. It makes you go to the Urshilaku burial caverns to fetch something for him. The caverns are a step up from Earthengand, and it uses water, height, and ghosts to force you to adapt, and afterwards, Debani Mesa will tell you about the Nerevarine prophecy. The Nerevarine prophecy is one of my favorite aspects of the story. There are 7 trials the player would need to fulfill to be the Nerevarine, and you currently meet some of them and not others, meaning you may or may not be the Nerevarine. There are 2 interpretations of the player's role as the Incarnate, those being that you are literally the soul of Saint Nerevar reborn, and that this status allows you to overcome the trials of the game, and the second being that you become the Nerevarine solely through overcoming the trials as your own person, becoming legendary through your own perseverance. This is actually, I think, more intended to be a meta commentary, and it's asking you if your character does what they do in-game because of the lore and story of the setting, or if your character does what they do because you, the player, like playing video games. And you persevered and overcame Morrowind's jank to get there. I lean heavily towards it being the second interpretation, but most people who started the series with Oblivion or Skyrim would probably prefer the first interpretation. This sort of up-to-interpretation story also plays well into the characterization of Azura, as her prophecies are often vague and she usually only speaks to people who have already done enough to fit into them, which make her visions look better. And through a lot of her dialogue sounding more happy that the Tribunal are dying than the Dunmer being saved, it kind of supports this a little bit. The trial you fulfill by default is being born on a certain day, which is your character's birth sign. By creating a character, you fulfill 2 of the trials, and the next trial is something Debani will refuse to tell you about. When you go back to Caius, you get sent to a 6-house base, which is much less of a dungeon escalation, since it's just corridors, but a combat gauntlet of harder enemies than before. And you'll end it with getting cursed with Corpus. And on returning to Caius this time, you get sent to go get cured by the Telvanni wizard Devethir, the legendary Gunnar who created 4 femme clones of himself that he uses as a harem. Every day that you have the disease, your strength and endurance get stronger, and your intelligence, willpower, agility, speed, and personality lower. People also treat you like a plagued monster, which is kind of appropriate.
Get him out of here! He's got AIDS!
The cool thing is that when you get cured, you keep your beneficial stats, which I love to abuse to get 100 extra strength so I can carry stuff easier. While getting cured, you run into Yagram Bagaram, an average Elder Scrolls YouTuber who is the person that can help you with the backdoor if you kill Vivek or mess up any main quest by killing story NPCs. You can kill him too before getting Wraithguard fixed, which would probably ruin the game for most people, but you can chug health potions to deal with Sunder and King's health drain. Meaning Morrowind is really and truly free in terms of allowing you to skip forward stages in the main quest and kill whoever you want, which I want to emphasize is the freedom you feel by not using it. There isn't a good reason to kill Yagram, but by choosing not to instead of Yagram being immortal by the game's logic, it makes you feel more like you're choosing to work with and save the people of Vardenfell, since you could easily kill most of the population. Now that you're cured of the negative symptoms of Corpus but still afflicted with it, you are now immune to all diseases and aging, fulfilling more of the prophecy of the Nerevarine. Caius tells you to go save one of the people you talked to in Vivek earlier for him before leaving, giving you his house as a player home, the Moonsugar Skooma Den home. The lady is inside that meteor, and once you save her, you go to a safe house for the dissonant priests, people who believe in the prophecy of the Nerevarine who are persecuted heavily by Vivek. which has always made me think he's covering up for his murder of Nerevar. Now that she's safe, the priests give you the lost prophecies which the Ashlander leading Nibani from the Urshalaku will read, and then help you complete the rest of the 7 trials. The first 2 trials are completed, and now the 3rd trial is to find the Cavern of the Incarnate, which is given in a really vague riddle, but unfortunately I found it by accident doing other quests, so I kind of already knew where it was. Inside, Azura gives you her ring for a whopping 5 personality points, which is one of the most worthless Daedric artifacts of all time, whereas one of the failed incarnates gives you her dirty panties, which you can use to levitate. So I don't know, man. Maybe Azura's star would have been better or something. Now you're Azura's little PogChamp, you can go back to Nibani for the 4th and 5th trials. These trials are to become Hortator of the Great Houses and Nerevarine of the Ashlander tribes. This means 7 whole groups will need to be persuaded to see you as an important figure worthy of the title, which will mean talking to every single counselor of the houses and doing chores for them, or doing fetch quests and escort missions for the tribes. There's no way to mince words here. This is so ass. It makes lore sense and makes the world feel more real, but it slows down the pace of the game and it just straight up is not fun to play. Even if you meet the GOAT, Crash's Curio here. Something really nice about this quest is that if your character is level 20 and has 50 reputation, you can skip these trials and be declared Hortator and Nerevarine directly by Vivek, which fulfills the trials. Either way, Vivek finally talks to you and gives you Wraithguard to wield Sunder and Keening, the tools of the dwarf tonal architect Kraganak, to destroy the heart of Lurkon and defeat Dagoth-Ur. Vivek allows you to ask about the murder of Nerevar and essentially avoids the question, telling you to go read 2 different accounts on it, which has a testament to how well written this game is I did on stream. The unreliable narrator is used in this game because it is a game, and so the way you interpret the events of the story are an active decision, which is such a based way to write the game, because this is a video game. I know nowadays video games are cutscenes with QuickTime events, but at the core of it, video games are the only art form where the art itself changes depending on how you interact with it. So making the story up for interpretation is so fitting. Skipping the trials isn't really relevant, since any character at level 20 with 50 reputation is too strong for the main quest anyways. Now that all we have left to do are the 6th and 7th trials, which are to go retrieve the tools of Kagrenak and defeat Dagoth-Ur, we should go over the power threshold, since we're going to beat the game. Every character in Morrowind hits a point where no enemy in Vardenfell is too strong anymore. Some of the DLC areas are a little weirdly tuned, which I'll talk about later, but sometimes if you fight multiple high-level enemies at once on higher difficulties, you can get stagger chain due to how the formula for stagger works. But in terms of a fair challenge in terms of damage, enemy placement, skill, there is a point where nothing on the island of Vardenfell will threaten you. Because of the fact that there are 3 levels of progression, damage, accuracy, and gear, all characters start out much weaker than in Oblivion or Skyrim. But by the end, you are significantly stronger than either of those games, and this happens much more quickly too. It's something that is balanced so an inexperienced character who rushes the main quest might be near the threshold on their way to Red Mountain, but anyone who does side quests like the factions or explores a lot in between will have thoroughly surpassed the threshold and will absolutely obliterate Dagoth-Ur with no difficulty. In a way, this is satisfying to show how far you've come from getting mugged by rats in Balmora to obliterating the 6th house and the tribe unmourned. But it does make the rest of the game really unsatisfying to play afterwards. I think the game is designed to be built in such a way that a character would either do the main quest, or the factions that coincide with their playstyle, like Redoran and Fighters Guild for a warrior, before ending the character and making a new character. Something that's actually promoted by the fact that new character is in the pause screen of the game. As someone who always hybridizes their builds, this leads to the game being really fun at the mid-game, but becoming very boring later on, and since the difficulty just changes damage numbers, it isn't really the most satisfying answer to this progression issue. With Dagoth-Ur defeated, the world does actually change. The 6th house bases stop respawning, sleepers stop attacking you, civilians who were possessed stop rambling in the streets, and ash storms stop happening in the overworld. You do feel like you saved the world, which is a good feeling. I could go on a rant now about how the story is over, about how much I dislike the DLC here, but seeing as how the DLC is tacked on content that is fully intended to be played after defeating Dagoth-Ur, I don't think it's very necessary to do so. And most of the optional quests in both DLC are available at any level, meaning you can join the East Empire Company and build Raven Rock without beating Dagoth-Ur or touching the Blood Moon main story, which I do like quite a bit. If you guys like the DLC, tell me why in the comments. I tried multiple times to do both and could not get into either DLC since they just felt like busy work. There's also this really weird scaling issue where like every enemy in the DLCs are like tuned to be characters that are difficult for like a character that has beaten Dagoth to fight. So in terms of progression, it's definitely meant to be main story, Tribunal, Blood Moon, but it, no matter how you try to justify it, it feels so bad to go from beating Dagoth to like getting mugged by bears in Solstheim and actually dying, or goblins in the sewers of Tribunal. There's no way to actually make that feel good, I don't think. And I think that's why the scaling system exists in the next two games, which is actually rather unfortunate. So, is Morrowind worth playing in 2024? I have to say no. All of the things I commented on are overwhelmingly worse to experience yourself, and the slow movement speed in early game in general are horrible if you're new to the game. Add on top of this that I played the game in OpenMW, which is notably more stable than vanilla, and you'd be experiencing random crashes and bugs on top of the slow movement. You would be constantly retracing slow, tedious steps. I had a constant discussion where people would ask me on stream if I thought the game was worth getting into, and I had to say no, because I did not start enjoying my time with the game until about 10 hours in, which is completely asinine to ask of anyone. 10 hours is enough to watch the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, all seasons of Mob Psycho 100, a season of The Boys, play Sonic Mania, play a Ratchet & Clank game, read an arc of a fast-paced manga like Chainsaw Man or Jujutsu Kaisen, practice a skill, practice a hobby. I did find a wonder inside of Morrowind, but I forced myself through those 10 hours on stream, and would never have done that on my own time. However, there is one reason I would recommend Morrowind to anyone with a PC they can play games on. Mods. While I do certainly think the base product needs to be taken into account, which is why the first run I did of Morrowind, roughly 20 hours, was almost completely vanilla besides OpenMW. Because of that, I think Morrowind out of the box does not hold up, and that the good aspects of the game are overpowered by the bad ones. With mods, however, we can draw out that purely good energy and end up with something incredible. I complained about the movement speed, but with mods I can add in the Pants of Binding Speed and use console commands for potions of magicka resistance and Satanin.
Here we go! Ah! Feeling good! Yeah! Let's go! Ha! Ho! Huh! Ah!
Meaning aside from Crashius Curio ogling our thighs, we can be fast the entire game. Fatigue draining from running is kind of poorly implemented, so I can just remove that. Magicka not regenerating when you wait slows down the pace of areas like Vivec, so I added in fair magicka regeneration. No hit chance percentage on weapons is frustrating, so I added a hit chance UI that tells me what percent chance to hit is. Now when I know I only have 40% chance to hit, I get less mad and go make a priority to train my weapon skills. I do think there is a value to the base release of games being a certain quality, considering Morrowind became relevant recently because of how mid Starfield was, which was on purpose as they expected people to mod the game for them. On the flip side is New Vegas, my favorite game of all time that I played for over a decade on the Xbox 360, completely vanilla, crashes and all. New Vegas is an incredible game that can be modded. Starfield is a husk that needs to be modded. Morrowind does have an inherent beauty to it, but fighting the game itself to enjoy Morrowind is necessary if it isn't modded. I think there is an argument to be made Morrowind isn't supposed to be fun, which if you take this opinion, makes the bad parts good parts and adds to the experience of the game as more of an art piece, as how horrible certain aspects are, to highlight how miserable and terrible being the Nerevarine would be. Sort of like Majora's Mask being frustrating and tedious on the first time add to the anxiety and stress of that game. If Morrowind is meant to be stress-inducing and frustrating, the unmodded experience is a true piece of art. However, if it is supposed to be a fun game, the modded experience is just as, if not more, incredible. And I think modding is fair. I've gone back and forth a few times on how I feel about it, but I sort of had an epiphany. Ocarina of Time, one of the biggest games of history, released on like 4 different consoles, and remastered on the 3DS, just flat out does not have anywhere near the number of mods that any Bethesda game, new or old, does. The mods are not official, but the accessibility offered in modding is more officially available for this game than other franchises, which I do think makes modding something uniquely powerful to Bethesda games. So is Morrowind worth playing in 2024? Yeah. Oh god, my throat is destroyed. Thank you for 500 subscribers! Let's go! I got channel memberships because of that, so please join if you want to, as it'll let you get videos early, and I'll even post my scripts as I write them to get feedback. And if I get enough people on the second level, I'll post member-only polls to decide what videos I make, when I don't have something set in stone, or shorts, or what have you. If you really like this video, check out these videos made by people on Morrowind, as out of all the videos I've seen, these ones are the most worth checking out if you like this type of video. Goodbye!